Well, welcome to Wind Up Wednesday. So today we're going to focus on part 3 of our deductive wine tasting process, and that is the palate. So there are essentially two breakdowns of the palate. One is just the kind of the fruit assessment, the condition assessment of the wines, paralleling what we did with the aroma nose portion. We'll taste the wine, we'll confirm the fruits that we taste, we'll confirm fruit condition, earthwood, minerality, all of those things. But the second part goes into structure of the wines, and a very, very key area of tasting. We'll focus on acidity, alcohol, body. We'll focus on tannin on red wines. We'll focus on fermentation methods on white and red wines. I didn't talk about it in the aroma portion of the white wine tasting because I didn't really find it, but a big component of that is lees aging. We'll talk about texture, balance, length, finish, and complexity. And those two pieces combined together really help to form a complete picture of what the wine that we're tasting is. So let's go through and taste the white wine that we were looking at. So just a couple of assessments. On the site, we had a sort of a pale straw wine, green rim, showed some evidence of legs, suggesting some alcohol. On the nose, tons of like fresh citrus notes, tropical notes, a little bit of a canned peach note. Not a ton of minerality, a little bit of white gravel, slight floral note, with some, crushed white flower. Not a lot of, sort of earthy notes, maybe some very fresh white mushroom. But on the whole, it was driven by, sort of, tropical citrusy fruit notes. So we'll go and taste and see if we find more of those things or it moves us in another direction. All right, off we go. So you notice when I was tasting that I was put the wine in my mouth and I was drawing air through my palate to sort of volatilize the aroma compounds in the wine, to get them going through my olfactory passage. And I practice a process of what they call retronasal tasting, where you're breathing out as well and creating this full circle of volatilized aromas for your palate to assess. The one thing that I personally do, it's just a personal technique of mine after I take a sip, is that I breathe in a couple of times very quickly. And this helps me assess kind of the alcohol levels of the wines. If I do that process and there's a level of burn, I can kind of gauge where alcohol is, and it's really kind of silly, but it's like, does it burn here? Does it burn here? Does it burn here? So just kind of a trick of the trade that someone had shared with me in the past, and it works for me personally. So anyway, so in tasting the wine, I confirm all of those fruit qualities that I had. It was definitely zesty citrus, zesty lemon, zesty lime, pink grapefruit. The pineapple note kind of carried through a little bit more. I lost some of that canned peach note that came through. The quality of the wine for me was a lot more fresh, a lot more racy from a textural component. The wine's very racy. It's very alive in my mouth. There's a lot of, just flat out say it's saliva going on. The wine's driven by acidity and just all those fresh fruit qualities. Very clean. Once again, not a ton of minerality. I still have a little bit of that crushed rock sensation, a little bit of the white mushroom from an earthiness perspective. But on the whole, it confirmed all of those things that I was saying in the aroma portion of the grid. There was, slight vegetal notes, a little more herby, maybe now just a little bit of an onion skin quality coming through, but no real spicy notes. Um, uh, yeah, so just, good confirmation there. So, not really seeing any evidence of wood. To me, it's very clean. I'm convinced that this is done in a neutral vessel, and stainless steel is probably the choice. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to taste for structure. So with that said, there's a little bit of a bitterness to the wine. It's kind of interesting. They call that phenolic bitterness, and that can come from, it could be a variety thing. It could be some fermentation techniques that are involved with skin contact. But for a white wine, there's a little bit of phenolic bitterness there. And it's good. Tannin is a box on the grid. We don't really assess it for white wine, although there can be white wines that have tannin as a component piece. We look at acid on this wine. Now, in this particular wine, I think I referenced it during my tasting of the fruit portions. And this is a medium plus, if not high acid wine. My mouth is alive. It's salivating. There's lots going on. It's coming down kind of both sides of my cheeks, and the acidity is it's stimulating. It's really, really nice. Alcohol on this wine, I think you saw my initial reference. To me, that's in the high zone. And this is telltale. So this kind of supports what we saw in the site portion of the assessment. It was confirmed a little bit in the aroma portion when I discussed ripeness. But for me, given sort of the quality or the color of the wine and where it is, with this level of alcohol, I'm leaning towards a New World wine where there's a little more sun ripeness and creating more sugar in the grape, which therefore is converted into more alcohol during fermentation. This wine, from a textural point of view, is it's kind of racy. It's driven by that acidity. It's driven by all those citrus notes. It's active. It makes your palate jump up and say hello. It's really, really nice. The body is kind of medium. While there are lots of flavors, there's richness, there's a little bit of a textural component from ripeness. On the whole, the body of the wine is balanced by acidity and that ripeness, putting it in kind of a medium camp in my mind. It has a medium plus length. I'm still tasting, those bright tropical notes. The grapefruit's still hanging around my palate. The pineapple's still hanging around my palate. So it has a pretty long finish. Yeah. And then complexity, I'd say it's medium plus as well. I'm talking about a lot of things, right? I'm talking about a lot of fruit things. So it's not checking some of the other boxes, which kind of pushes it back on the complexity point. But there's still lots happening there. So with that said, the next step is kind of gathering our information and trying to make a conclusion on what the wine is. So given the fact that there's a ripeness of fruit, there's elevated alcohol, there's acidity, which to me is a function of the variety. I know what the wine is, but in supporting all of this, I'm able to to say that feel this is a New World wine, defined by elevated alcohol, sort of a sun ripeness to the fruit, a diminished amount of minerality, a diminished amount of sort of an earthy quality. The varietal is one that is high acid, so high acid Grape varietals for white wine are Riesling, in this, well, the high acid, medium plus acid, Riesling, Sauvignon Blanc, Chenin Blanc, Albarino, yeah, so just, given the nature of the fruit, the grapefruit pith, all that, this wine is a Sauvignon Blanc from the New World, from California, that drinks like the sunshine and warmth that it is. It's really, really delicious. So next we'll move on to the red. Okay, so now we'll taste the red wine that we had. So just to backtrack a little bit, we kind of determined that we have a thin-skinned red varietal, medium ruby core, leading into a bit of an orange rim. We confirmed a lot of red and black fruits. We confirmed like it's of a developing age on the aroma. We'll certainly assess that. We saw a lot of red and black fruit notes coming through, some other, like non-fruit notes coming through, some interesting ones like blood and bouillon and, violets and rose and all of those things. So with that said, we'll follow the same process. We'll taste the palate to confirm, what we experienced during the aroma nose portion of the tasting, and then we'll taste again to assess structure. So here we go. Yeah. So I don't know if we talked about this much during the aroma portion, if I discussed ripeness or whatever. I hope I gave the impression that there was some ripeness to the fruit. But the one thing that's happening in that taste is that ripeness is transferring more into sort of a tart quality. So we had, ripe raspberry, ripe red cherry, ripe black cherry, black plum. Now I'm getting black plum skin. All those kind of fruit conditions are coming across in a much more tart way. So just to assess the wine is clean on the palate. I do get a little bit of those earthy notes of the saddle leather. There's a lot more bitterness coming through in that black walnut component. But confirming all of those fruit notes that we had, the red plum, the blackberry, or black cherry. The floral notes are there, the crushed rose, the crushed violet, all those notes are there. The bitterness of the Amaro is shifted from some of that sort of orange quality to more of sort of those darker Amaro notes. There's, like a chinchilla bitterness to it. I get the blood orange skin. There's like all that bitterness sort of ties into that. Herbal, thyme, oregano, that beef bouillon quality is still there, delicious. There's like an irony, like bloody quality to the wine. To me, still reeks of wet clay soils or cooler soils. There's like a little bit of a red apple skin coming through now, to me, which is a marker for something that I love. So just, everything that we tasted or smelled on the aroma portion is coming through confirmed. I'm not getting tons of vanilla. I'm not getting tons of cinnamon. I'm not getting tons of coconut or dill or oak. So to me, this is not indicative of a wine that has seen new oak. I do think that this wine is driven by an oxidative quality, which means that it has been fermented in a large wooden vessel, which accounts for a lot of air, like exposure to oxygen, and a microoxygenation that I can never say that takes place in those large vessels. So the major shift from the aroma side to the palate side was this transition of fruit ripeness from being somewhat ripe yet developed into converting into a more tart component, and that's a tell for old world wines. But it has all that sort of earthiness, mushroominess. Yeah, it's really tasty. All right, so now we'll taste for structure. So the wine is alive in my mouth. There's a real freshness to the acidity. The wine is developed, things are decaying. The acid is not. It's providing a lot of freshness in my mouth. There's activity in the front of my palate, washing back. I'd put the acidity level at medium plus, bordering on high. That puts us in a camp of a few red wine varietals, which is kind of neat. Alcohol on the wine is definitely in the medium plus camp. I do think that this comes from a warmer climate, but I don't think this was a particularly warm vintage. I don't know. But that's my assessment. In terms of like the texture of the wine, it's a little lean. You know, there's a rusticity to it, which is interesting. But the acidity kind of, puts it in this direction that wipes away a lot of, like what could be considered fat. And it's kind of lean, it's rustic. The tannins are medium plus, bordering on high. Once again, they're very fine grained, they're rustic. They're definitely of a type. So tannin and description of tannin is very important. And sort of full-bodied Cabernet-based wines like that, your big Napa cabs and things like that. The tannins are like long chain. They're really velvety. They're really soft. They're really, mouth coating. They're luxurious. And wines like this, they're a little more aggressive. They come across a little more astringent, a little more drying, and it really ties into like the overall package of the wine. So when I talked about like the dried herbs and all of those things, it's kind of supported by this drying effect of the tannin in the wines, which I'm describing as rustic, if that means anything to you. Texturally, the wine's kind of lean. It isn't balanced. It's beautifully balanced. There's a lot of things going on. The length is medium plus. The wine is complex. Still have lots of things happening in there, but it's all like really savory and like tertiary. So this wine to me was very symbolic of an old world wine. It comes from an area that has strict kind of regulations on how the wine is produced, how the grapes are grown, how the wine is made, how how it's aged and fermented, and the wine speaks of that very clearly. So it comes from a warm climate, yet there's this underlying raciness to it, that's driven by acid. I think that's a function of the grape variety. The grape variety itself is noted for higher acids, but I also think it comes from a potentially cooler vintage as well. What am I not talking about? I don't know. Anyway, so what we tasted in the red was a Sangiovese based wine from Chianti. It was a Chianti Classico, just, very traditional Italian red, um, um, from the 2014 vintage. Just an average producer, but wines of this type are very, of the type. They're very specific. And so that's what makes this whole thing fun. So you taste through the wines, you check your boxes, you reference back to your boxes, and hopefully you're able to, get enough things right that it puts you on the path for final conclusion. Anyway, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at jheffron, Heffron, at centralclub.org. I hope you enjoyed this process. Take care. Bye.